So welcome to a wargame preview from theplayersaid.com. My name's Alexander.
And I'm Grant.
And today we're taking a look at a game called Saladin. And this is coming to Kickstarter very soon. Or it's already on Kickstarter and you're watching it on
the video,
Kickstarter page. So it's designed by Denis Sauvage and it's produced by a French company called Shakos. You probably know that because you read the Kickstarter. So this is kind of a small form war game. And it is it's kind of like one of those static style war games where you've got your little wooden pieces and they move, but not in the same way as a lot of other big war games do. Whereas a fast playing 2-player game where you're playing out 2 different battles as part of the Crusades.
Yeah. The concept is that they choose a leader and then they pick 2 of the more important battles that they participated in. So this is Hattin and Arsuf.
Yes.
The 2 battles
and
that are included.
Yeah. So looking at Crusades, basically...
Which is always a great theme.
Yes, I think so.
Always a theme that I think we enjoy playing.
It's interesting, historically speaking, and culturally and religiously speaking. The history is fascinating, if not incredibly bloody. And we're playing out some of the bloodiest parts of that, at least in combat, so to speak.
Yeah.
In this one, you set up with... you have formations, so to speak. And those are... You have a card with the name, a symbol of who it corresponds to. You have a group of these little wooden lances.
Lances is what they're called.
Little pieces.
They're matchsticks. They're blocks.
And so, a formation will have anywhere from like 9 to 12 of them, typically speaking. And you have a little menu of things that you can do based on certain conditions. Are you kind of stepped back? Are you uncommitted? Or are you committed in melee? That's the little tan and the white sections. And then also on top of that, you have your full side of orders is from the first, like you start with, and then once you've had one order, you flip this over and you have a more limited menu of orders.
Some of them go away or they change slightly, but some pretty much stay the same.
Yeah, so there's a couple of different states with regards to those that your formations can be in, but basically, when your turn comes up, you have a pool of orders. You spend those orders to do one of the actions on your menu. You're trying to kill the enemy. You're trying to maybe reinforce yourself or position yourself within the bounds of what you can do in order to gain an advantage. And the game is basically you fight back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And this pool of orders, you spend them, you get them back in a round. You spend them, you get them back the next round. And then once that's exhausted by losing formations and other game effects, losing units, once your pool is completely gone, you have no orders left, you lose the game. Just your army's broken down. Basically, everyone's dead at that point anyway.
Yeah.
It's rare to have not everyone dead once you lose everyone. And that's the game. It plays quickly. It says it plays in 45 minutes. If you play the whole length, like, I don't know, if you both eke it out, until that time, it's probably going to be that long. It could be that something swings and you get it fairly one-sided, and it'll be a bit shorter than that.
Sure.
But it's
it is contingent upon some dice rolling.
Yes.
Right? Those dice are custom dice. They have really 4 different results on them. One is 2 losses. One is 1 loss. One is force the enemy to lose an activation. And then there's a couple of blank sides. So, if you run up a charge, you're rolling 3 dice, and you roll 6 hits or 2 on, it's going to be a short battle.
Yes. Right?
That's going to cause the other player to lose some orders and really cost too much to activate those guys. So it's really going to make them on the back foot.
Yes.
And that's what ends up happening. And you'll feel that coming. It was very interesting to feel that, oh man, I'm almost on that point of collapse.
Yeah. The first round or two, it feels like, you've got your nice battle lines, everyone's pretty decently intact, you kind of fight back and forth, doing some chip damage here and there, and then things start, you lose an order from something, and then, you might lose another order from having guys wiped out, and then you're like, okay. Then you get into a deficit, and then your orders start getting more expensive as you lose more guys, so you think you got this really big pool, and it shrinks very quickly from the number standpoint, but also from the cost standpoint.
Yeah.
So it shrinks from both ends, and
Right, it's kind of two ends meeting in the middle, making it tough.
which is very neat, and
Yeah.
it creeps up on you, and then all of a sudden, it's a game that, whilst it was on a knife edge to start with, I think the momentum will take it one way or the other very quickly.
Yeah.
Because you start getting into like 8 or 9 orders only, but everything costs 2 or 3, where in the first round everything costs 1, and you're like, okay, I can only activate 2 or 3 of my formations, which means the other 2 are going to rout off the they're going to rout,
right.
which means they take more damage, which means I might lose
more
orders
yep.
and more, and so things spiral very quickly in this game, which is how they keep it to 45 minutes.
I think the 3 key elements about this design that I think make it very unique, that order system is very interesting and cool because these are asymmetric. I was the Crusaders, you were the Ayyubids, led by Saladin. You had a really different menu of actions than I did. You had some ability to do some feint and some evade. So I couldn't just charge you and hit home every time. So that really makes this game very unique. It reminds me a lot of a game like Table Battles, where different formations have different abilities. But those orders, you lose those orders when you lose 6 units of any kind from across all of your armies. You've got this little tracker.
Yeah, a little holding box.
Little holding box. Once you've lost that 6th unit, those go away into the box, and you lose one of your available units.
One of orders, yeah.
Orders.
Permanently.
Permanently. Unless they've all been spent, then you take it away from the ones you've already spent.
But
they go out of the game.
It stings when it comes out of the available box, because you're like, not only did you lose an order, it was from ones that you were going and planning on spending. You're like, oh no.
So that is really fascinating. You already mentioned it. That cost escalation is really, really, really painful.
You feel it very quickly.
Yes. And really these orders, I think in the military term, it's probably a lack of cohesion than anything else. You've lost key leaders or key veteran units, and therefore it's going to cost you more to make that formation do something. Yeah. They just don't have the ability.
They're exhausted, they've been fighting in melee, or they might be in melee combat. Trying to get them to do anything is going to be difficult. It's really, really an interesting little economy that you have with those orders.
But it's really light. I think it plays very quickly. But I'm going to be honest, there was a lot of tension. There was a lot of decision and hand-wringing about what to do.
I felt like the first round, we're kind of just like figuring out the rules of the game.
We were feeling each other out.
And then rounds 2 and 3, the room got very quiet.
Yeah.
Because we were both like,
how do I do this? Yeah.
Because it could have gone one way or the other. Because you did a lot of damage to me early. My dice roll was pitiful.
Yep.
And I lost 2 orders and like 12 units really early on.
Very quickly.
And I was like,
I thought it was going to be an easy day for me.
And then I had to claw my way back in turn 2, where it became a bit more even, and then turn 3, it kind of started to swing the other way because I was able to get in some big rolls, and it was like, oh my goodness.
Well, and then the really interesting part is after round 2. So when you're resetting for round 3, right? No, you lose at the end of the round. So at the end of round 2 that you start losing one order.
It's starting with round 2.
Starting with round 2.
You lose it at the beginning of round 2. The chaos phase is at the beginning. The chaos phase.
The chaos phase. So it causes you to lose one of your available orders.
Yes.
And you know what? If you've lost a formation, if you've killed a formation and you control the banner, I lose another.
Yeah,
order.
Killing formations is difficult. Well, it can be. Because there's generally...
there's 10 or 12
9 dudes in one at least.
I mean, look at Saladin; he has like 15 here.
But if you can wipe formations, not only do you lose your one normally, that it's just a degradation of your command and control, but you lose one per banner or formation that you've lost. Yeah. So that can escalate and compound very, very quickly. As well.
And be very painful. I mean, when you killed those 2 units, man, I lost 3 orders that one round. Yeah. And I looked at my order pool and I'm like, I know I'm in trouble.
Well, not only does that, but what it also does is it incentivizes you to finish people off.
It does.
As well.
Yep.
It would be really easy to just leave one guy over here.
He can't do anything.
I want to kill him before the round's over so that you lose an extra. I mean, you're incentivized to do those things, which is nice, right? The game wants you to interact with it, which is good.
Well, and how many times did we try to do that to finish off a formation? And even on those dice, there's only 2 blanks.
There's 2 blanks.
I swear to you, about 50% of the time we rolled blanks,
if not more.
Yeah, and it's so interesting how randomization can happen. Then we started messing around after, and it's like
all my good rolls came out after the game.
Everything was double hits, and it's just so interesting. So that keeps that light, chaotic nature of a dice, a game that has combat resolution with dice.
Yeah, and dice are going to help make sure that your games aren't, even though the setup's identical, no 2 games are going to be the same, because your dice roll is going to be different.
Yep.
And after those first 3 or 4 dice rolls, you start to get a bigger picture of where your army's at, what you can and can't do, where and when, and it's going to form a different kind of picture, even though the grand arc of the game is probably going to be similar.
The other thing I really enjoyed, the leaders have these special abilities. They can recover orders. They can recover from this holding box of lost units, 1 lost unit to any formation, or they can do then a final, like Saladin can take the cross, and I can kind of start running for the horns and try to run off. So it's interesting that those leaders have a role, and you find yourself holding that as an ace up your sleeve, trying to win that advantage of multiple orders higher than you, so that I control a little better what happens. And what I mean by that is we're always trying to game each other, because you've got things that you can evade and hold me off, and I'm like, I want you to use that or not be able to use it.
Yes. So
I can finish you off with a full charge.
Yeah, like a lot of games, any game that has like an economized number of activations, you every single time, regardless of what game it is, always want to out-activate your opponent.
Yeah.
Because that means you have an equal amount of activations, and then I've got my extras where at the end of the game, I do whatever I want at the end of my turn.
Yep.
And,
unopposed, almost. You know, it's like, I'm going to attack you here because boo-boo, you can't do anything.
And that represents, your advantage. It's like, man, you can put people to the sword. And early in the game, it felt like that. It was very cagey. I'm doing like, I'd rather do maybe a weaker 1 activation thing rather than use up my reaction moves or doing a big thing early, because then I'm going to have fewer orders to spend. So that kind of stuff's really neat.
It's interesting that a game in this format, as simple as the rule set is, has that much, I'm going to call it tension. Yes. And difficult decisions. There's a lot of that in this game. I also found it interesting, more often than not, I was more interested in making you lose an order on this roll. Yeah. And it didn't happen very much. It's 1 out of 6.
1 in 6, so it's not going to happen often. But when it does, it's
it feels good.
Ooh, yeah, I didn't kill anyone, but if anything, that might be better.
Yeah, and sometimes it is better for you to lose an order. And I don't know. So a lot of those elements that are baked into the design, I think, work really well and really make this it's light, but there's a little bit of strategy and some tactics here and some...
It's not complicated, but there's a lot to think about.
Yeah.
Considering it, and the other part of the whole orders and activations is, if you have no orders left and you have guys that you haven't ordered, they will forcibly... do their route basically. It's is it route? There's another one, isn't there? Or is it just all route? Oh, you had the uncontrolled charges.
Yeah, uncontrolled charge, which I was actually better with that. I was okay with that compared to the route.
You'd rather that than a route.
The route, you were rolling 3 dice to inflict wounds on me, and I had to retreat, and that's brutal.
Yeah,
man, that is brutal.
If you're forced to route, the enemy just rolls a bunch of free dice against you, and it sucks.
So you don't want that to happen.
So yeah, so the game is neat in that when you start getting fewer orders, you're like, I'm just going to do a weak thing with every single one because I would rather them all activate so that they don't, get their own funny ideas and start running away.
Yeah,
and as such, you're like, well, I want to do this big thing with this guy, but it's more important that everyone doesn't run away. Yeah. So you start making very different command decisions than you normally would.
I'm just going to shoot some arrows.
Yeah.
1 order. Oh, I didn't do anything. Well, at least I'm going to have orders to activate these other guys who will now not route.
Yes.
And that's key. That's a big part of the game.
And as that pool shrinks, doing those things gets really expensive.
Yep.
And so you're just like, sod it, I'm going to let him route.
Route off the board.
That's all we got.
Yeah.
Like, I can't afford to spend all that money to make
Yeah.
him not route.
And ultimately, allowing them to route leads to your death knell. I mean, that's just the way it is. There were also some very interesting historical elements that were inserted into this. You had the ability to light a fire. So
Yes.
during this battle, they must have lit a fire that caused some confusion, and it ended up taking orders away from me. It was a 1-for-1 exchange.
Well, so to light the fire is a 3-to-1 the first time.
Right.
To keep it up is a 1-to-1.
So that's an interesting decision you had to make to...
Yeah, you invest early on that first turn, and it's like, that's expensive.
Yeah.
But if you can keep that up, especially if you can inflict wounds on them, it's an easy exchange.
Well, I think 4 turns you have to get your investment back, right?
Yes.
3, 4, 5, 6 to cause me to lose.
But 4 turns in, I've done enough damage to you. You've also lost a bunch where even losing 1, even though I took that penalty in the first turn, losing 1 in round 3 hurts more than losing 1 in round 1.
Oh, I totally agree.
The exchange rate on things like that as the game progresses is such an interesting economy.
I agree. There's a lot to like here. I think
it's amazing that can come from this little bundle.
Yeah, and we talk a couple of games to compare to it is W1815 and then Table Battles.
Yes,
I think both those games compare to this. This has some differences. Doesn't involve dice rolling to activate units, and so if you like those style of war games, this is going to be right up your alley.
Yes. What I'll do is I'll show you a little bit of the board, and then we'll wrap up with some final thoughts. So here's a look at the board, and we've got here, it's a small little board, and this is the kind of initial setup of one of the 2 scenarios. The other one's on the other side of the board. You can see we've got the Crusaders player has a card for each one of their formations, and they have a little symbol, a little icon of their particular kind of house, so to speak, and those are all next to the different formations that they are as well. And you do also have your kind of overall army leader, and then on this side we've got the Saladin player, and all their ones just kind of up here off screen. But if they have different abilities on them, but they look the same basically. So the way that this game functions, and we'll kind of move these leaders out of the way because this little pool is, you have these little discs over here and there's green ones up here. This is your pool of orders. These are order tokens. You spend orders equal to these numbers to do that particular action line. So to do a hold action, which has no effect, costs 1. You still have to tell your troops to not do anything. If you want to charge with these guys, it costs 2 action points. If you want to just shoot some arrows, do a loose action, only costs 1. And you'll see there's a number of actions that cost 0, and they're more negative ones. So an uncontrolled charge is not a good thing to do. Or just a rout, not a good thing to do, obviously. So those 0 actions, those trigger automatically if you haven't given that formation an order towards the end of the turn, and you don't have any orders left. If you kind of think of this as your command and control. If you spend all of your command and control doing other things, then the guys who are just there will take their own initiative, and their own initiative is usually not very good, or not as good as it would be with leaders. So how you economize your orders is very important, because you want to try and hold off the guys taking the initiative, again, in a bad way, as much as possible. So, for example, we'll just kind of do some bits and pieces. So, this guy over here, we got Reed Fort. He's here in the middle. He's guarding the True Cross. He doesn't have a lot of options. You can see he's got this kind of yellow sand-colored background on his actions, and that's because he's in an uncommitted situation. He can't move, so that he only has sand on there, for example. Whereas if we look at Raymond III, he's kind of, it's kind of hard to see, but he's in these two boxes which have a little sand-coloured icons on them, because, again, he's uncommitted. So he can choose from these uncommitted sand-coloured actions. If he ever charges, he'll move into these white boxes, which is basically you're committed, you're in melee attack. And then once you're in those boxes, you can no longer do the sand-coloured actions, you do the white-coloured actions. So it's fairly simple, you just gotta, the iconography, just get used to it, that's all. So a loose action, we'll do that with Reed Fort. He's going to do a loose action, they're going to shoot their arrows. And the other part of iconography here is, at the top you have who they can do it to, and who can do things to them. So these guys, all they can do is, whenever they do any of their actions, they can do it, this arrow is kind of going outwards, they can do it to them, these ones on the hill, and the guys on the hill can also do actions to them. So you know who can really attack who, right? These guys up here can't attack these guys all the way over here. Alright, makes sense in a way. So he's just going to loose, so we spend one order token goes to the kind of little used up pool here, and loose has one red die. So we just roll one of our red die, and we got a blank. Of course we did, because there's... So two sides of the dice have a blank on them. This one has, you lose a lance, which is what these are called, a little matchstick. You take a wound. You take 2 wounds. You take 1 wound, and then there's one space that's, you force the enemy to lose an order. So they would lose an order, which can sometimes be very painful. So shooting arrows at each other, plinking each other, you know, if you roll as poorly as we do, it doesn't do a lot, but it's a cheap way to do something. So now, because we gave them an order, we flip them over to their ordered side. And what you can see now is, so different color background, and now their menu of options is much more limited. And that's where some of the crunch of the game gets really important. And it gets really important when you're if you're playing as Saladin, because Saladin, he has a bunch of reactions in this battle, but he doesn't have them on the ordered side. So as the Crusader, you're trying to out-activate the opponent, you're trying to get them to use up their, order these units so that when you do charge them, they can't turn it into an evade. So there's levels of strategy and tactics as you try to outwit and outfox each other, which is really cool. So that's a loose, right? It's very simple. Spend one action, roll a die. And this, Saladin player, we've got, this guy's got skirmish, right? It does exactly the same thing. It's roll 1 die and combat costs 1, but you get a little bit more of the theme, because, maybe they were running around, had a couple light archers, but they have spearmen throwing spears, things like that. Or they can do a harass, and that's what we'll do. And that's these guys over here, up top. We're going to spend 2 orders to do a harass action. And a harass action is 2 green dice, and the opponent rolls 1 red dice. So we'll just roll it all together here. See, I roll a lot of blanks in this game, I'll tell you. But the green player does 2 red wounds. And we, we have to do it against these guys here. And the way they're positioned is a little bit odd. Because the guy Lucien, he's here in the front, but we're not actually attacking him. We're attacking the guys behind him. So these guys are, we're going to remove 2. And you can see here, these kind of rows are numbered. This is 1, 2, and 3. You pull from 1 first, and you pull from bottom to top as you're looking at the board. So we're going to remove 1, and we're going to remove 2. And why that's important, and they go into this little dead box down here. And that's really important because once you kill the 3rd guy, now if you want to give an order to this faction on this card over here, it's +1 to the order cost. So now a hold doesn't cost 1, it costs 2. A charge doesn't cost 2, it costs 3. And that's a huge, huge part of this game. So that was the Saladin player. Then we go back to the Crusaders. And so this is where you almost force the Crusaders' hand, because they can't afford to take another loss on here. Or you want to get your actions off as cheaply as possible. I guess is what I'm trying to say. So now we're going to activate them, and maybe I would have done something else, but I want to get these off because I don't want to have to pay an exorbitant orders cost to do something minor with them anyway. And so what we'll do is we'll pay 2 orders to do a charge. And this formation that we had activated here to harass them, it did have an evade action on it, but they were ordered, so they got flipped over, so now they can't evade anymore. Yeah, they've already done a big action, they can't do an evade action. So that's where you get into trying to force your opponents to do that kind of thing. And so a charge, it's got this little white forwards icon. They're going to move forward to their white holding box. And it's a little bit, move them around. I think this might be a misprint. I think these guys might be supposed to be here and these guys are supposed to be here, but this is a prototype, so it's no big deal as long as that gets addressed, I think. Alright. So they move forward. So now, after we resolve this, they're going to be using these committed actions on the white part of the menu, but they're going to do a charge, which means they roll 3 red dice, and we roll 1 green dice. So this is the big action. If you can get it to go off without the reactions, you want to try and do that. And that was a very, very successful charge. So the green had rolled a blank, we had 1 red blank, and then we did 3 green wounds. So this is the first column, 1, 2, 3. And these go off into the little dead box over here. And so that's how the fighting and the combat works. So now, if I ever wanted to do anything again with these guys, we revealed that +1, it's +1 order. It gets more and more expensive as they get into the fray and into combat. But basically, that's what this game is. There's some little special rules where you can commit a lot of actions early on to set fires, and that uses up some of the opponent's actions. Guy Lucien, he can make a shield wall, so these guys are all -1 damage to them, basically. And you do have... you've got an overall army leader, so we got Saladin here. You can get 1 order back that you've used up, or you can retrieve a dead guy and put him back on the board, which then you get a good, you lose that order penalty there, and you get a guy back. And there's some other bits that you can do, but what happens is eventually, let's say we lose a guy. Oh, not there. It would be this one here. We're gonna lose a guy. We're gonna lose a guy. Once this little box gets to 6, regardless of where they come from, all 6 of these go back into the box. They're out of the game completely. So now I can't replace. You can't get guys from out of the box. They can only come from here. Well, there's no one here, so I can't get those guys back. They're dead forever. But I also lose 1 order permanently. That goes in the box. So your order pool gets reduced, and your orders get more expensive to issue, and that's where the economy spirals really quickly. If you get the upper hand in that, things can turn on a dime. It's awesome. But basically what happens is things start to get very, very expensive, and the more expensive they get, the fewer things that you can do, or the fewer worthwhile things that you can do. And if that's the case, you may be only able to order a couple guys, and then you start having to take these uncontrolled charges. Now, you remember a charge was 3 red dice, 1 green dice. An uncontrolled charge is 1 red dice, 2 green dice. That's much worse. Or you might just rout. And that's a lot of the... if you're engaged in combat, you're just going to rout. So if any of the Saladin guys have to rout, you roll 3 red dice, and it's just a penalty, right? That stuff happens to you. Luckily, I'm terrible at rolling, so it's lots of blanks. But the way that the game kind of, the first turn, the first 2 turns at most, you feel like you got a good amount of cohesion, and then things drop off really quickly, and the chaos of a melee battle like this really comes to the forefront, which to me is very thematic, and I enjoyed it very much. But that's kind of the core of this game. There's so much trying to outwit and outfox each other. I'm trying to do a couple of little things to force you into starting to waste your big actions, or to do things that are suboptimal. The Crusader players trying to get me to use up all my guys that have the reactions on them, so that then their charges are better. But if you do that, your charges You might not have enough orders left because you spent some just wasting your time doing other things. Oh, it's fantastic. This is a really, really neat little package, and it's very nice to look at. I do have an issue with the green-red, obviously. We'll talk about that here in a bit. This is just, like, you gotta have different colors. You can't do green-red. That's, I don't know. That's just not something that we need to put in a game, that's all. If you're colorblind, this is just a disaster, frankly. But hopefully they'll get feedback on that, and we'll get, change one of the colors. That's all you need to do in reality. But if you could change both, that'd be fantastic. So that's kind of how the board works. I know there's more detailed videos on the Kickstarter page, so check those out as well. And we'll wrap up with some final thoughts here. So that was a look at the game. Again, nice little small package.
Well, and it's beautiful. I mean, the art is fantastic.
Yes.
I think the art captures the look and feel of that period. The box is very well laid out. I thought it was nice. Even as a prototype, they have some really nice components.
Yes, and I'm hoping that because this is a prototype, they're going to change at least one of the colors in this game.
Well, red-green is not good for... We're not colorblind, and we don't have... But there are some that...
This is a colorblind person's
nightmare. Yeah.
Everything is green or red. The dice are green with red pips, or they're red with green pips.
Yeah.
All the pieces are green or red.
The cards are green and red. Yeah.
Like, if
so that would be a change that needs to be made.
That's the big change that I would make is just pick different colors.
Yeah.
Like let's not do red green. That's the because it looks fantastic. The actual components themselves are great. Just the color choices is a bit of a no-no, honestly.
But all that said, I think that's my only real complaint with the game. Yeah. There were also some little elements that we think, because it's a prototype, there's probably a symbol here that didn't quite make sense, or we didn't have a full description of one of the abilities and didn't quite understand. The withdrawal was probably the big one. Where you have nowhere to go. Yeah. Your guys don't have a fallback position. So what does actually withdraw mean for you?
Because it's got a symbol on it to move back. Does that move you back?
Right. Does it force me to move back and create some distance? But then it also gave me no, it didn't. But so that's something I think maybe there needs to be a better description or understanding of that.
I presume that stuff will just be tidied up and might just be an interesting thing.
This is a prototype.
So, but the game itself was very engaging.
Enjoyable.
Looks great. The artwork's awesome.
Yep.
I had a blast playing this, especially with how quickly it plays. This is you
30 to 40 minutes.
And then you switch sides, play it again.
Yep.
You could easily do that. And it's one of those games that can... look how small it is.
You could throw it in your luggage for vacation.
Stick it in a collection.
Yeah,
this is a very approachable game by most people as well.
Well, and I think by all accounts, I think they're going to look at other leaders in the future. So. This had Saladin as the focus, but I think there's any number of great leaders that they could focus on.
Yeah.
I mean, Alexander the Great. I mean, they could do... King Richard the Lionheart. I mean, if you want to stay in that Crusades
almost unlimited number of things you could do.
So I look forward to seeing what they're going to do, and maybe even how that system evolves and changes. There's a lot to like here. I really enjoyed it. We had a good time playing this.
Appreciate you guys tuning in. This has been a preview for Saladin. I've been Alexander from theplayersaid.com.
And I'm Grant.